A legendary Navy pilot long presumed dead returns in a stolen jet, cuts through restricted airspace, and stops an entire fleet midair with just her voice. What starts as a mysterious mission turns into a race against time to expose a rogue AI program built from stolen human instincts. She uncovers a ghost operation that erased her co-pilot, and now they want her gone too. Welcome to my channel. You don't forget the first time a voice stops a fleet midair. They say names don't carry weight in military airspace anymore, not with IFF tags, encrypted codes, and heat-seeking payloads that don't wait for introductions. But that morning, up above the Gulf of Alaska, a single voice crackled over the emergency channel, and everything stopped. Jets froze in formation. Combat systems went dark. Because the voice belonged to a ghost. My name is Avery Callahan. I'm 42. Call sign, Blackbird. And 5 years ago, I vanished from active duty. Official records say I retired after a low-altitude crash left me with spinal damage and chronic nerve pain. Unofficially, they said I cracked under pressure, flew one too many black flag missions, held one too many secrets, and didn't know how to put them down. I'd spent more time off the radar than on it. Recon deep in contested airspace, surgical strike guidance, live-feed intel missions that technically never existed. I disappeared for a reason. I was done. Or so I thought. But this week, I received a sealed directive from Northcom. No briefing. No welcome back. Just 3 lines. You've been cleared. 1 aircraft. No support. Conduct integrity sweep of 5th Naval Defense Corridor. Engage under discretion. You are not expected. So I pulled the tarp off my old bird, a custom F-5 Tiger II I'd rebuilt by hand, flight tested myself, outfitted for stealth and deep electronic silence. She doesn't ping satellites. She doesn't broadcast ID. And she sure as hell doesn't ask permission. I took off just before dawn from an airfield I technically don't own, heading north across open ocean where the horizon melts into a gray mist that never blinks. And down below, nestled like a floating city of steel and resolve, was the USS Anchorage, flagship of the Northern Fleet and the last ship I ever called home. I hadn't flown over that deck since my final sortie, rescuing a downed flight crew from hostile airspace. I came back alone that day. My co-pilot, Eli, didn't. Now I was flying right back into their airspace, unannounced. Because the truth is, they weren't expecting a threat. They were expecting no one. But they were about to hear me. I was 30 miles out when they saw me. From up there, the ocean looked like slate. Cloud cover hung low, and I flew just beneath it, hugging the line between weather and radar. My Tiger II hummed under my hands. She was old, yes, but temperamental in a way that reminded you she was alive. No HUD, no automation. Every move, every correction, was mine alone. The fleet's early warning systems picked me up just as I entered the outer edge of their defense perimeter. No transponder. No filed flight plan. I was a ghost flying straight into the jaws of the most heavily fortified naval group in the Northern Hemisphere. That's when the voice came. Unidentified aircraft, you are approaching restricted airspace. Just heading to 215 immediately, or we will intercept. Polite. Professional. But tight. There was tension in the words. Whoever was in the CIC already knew I wasn't a tourist with a drone. I didn't answer. Not yet. This wasn't just a test of their systems. It was a test of their memory. 5 minutes passed. Then came the second call. Sharper. Colder. Unidentified aircraft. This is Arctic Watch. You are now entering a classified exclusion zone. Final warning. Divert course or we will respond with force. I stayed on course. Altitude, 11,000 feet. Speed, Mach 0. 75. Direct vector over the bow of the Anchorage. Down on that carrier deck, I imagined the scramble order being shouted. Boots hitting steel. Flight crews rushing out. A sound I knew like a heartbeat. Then came the shimmer of sunlight off polished wings. They'd launched Raptors. 2 of them, banking hard from the flight deck, vapor trails curling like smoke from dragon mouths. They were fast, aggressive, and flown by the kind of pilots who didn't flinch. Good. That's what I wanted. The lead pilot came in over the tactical channel. His voice was crisp, younger than mine, but I recognized the cadence. Trained. Sharp. Unidentified aircraft. This is Icebreaker 1. You are on a collision path with Task Force Polaris. This is your final warning before we engage. Still, I said nothing. My hand hovered over the mic. Not yet. I wanted them close. I could hear the chatter behind him in the open channel bleed. Combat Information Center trying to identify me. Flight controllers pulling up databases. No match. Because they weren't looking for someone like me. I adjusted my trim. Let the Raptor slide alongside me. I caught a glimpse through the canopy. He was younger than I'd expected, sharp jawline, visor down, scanning every inch of my airframe. That's when he saw the old insignia under my cockpit. A blackbird painted in silhouette, wings stretched wide, claws extended. Blackbird. I keyed my mic. This is Blackbird. Tell Anchorage I'm coming home. Stand down. Then I let the silence work. Because a real call sign doesn't need backup. It is the clearance. The moment I spoke, the entire channel went dead. No command blurted back. No warning shot. No scramble order. Just silence. If you've ever flown combat, you know that silence isn't peace. It's the space where decisions get made. Where careers pause mid-breath. Where people question what they think they know. I watched the Raptors peel off slightly, holding their positions but no longer crowding me. Icebreaker one's nose dipped, just barely, like a bow. Not an order. Not a retreat. A gesture of recognition. Then came a new voice. Older. Calmer. The kind that had barked over carrier decks for decades. All stations, this is Admiral Conrad aboard Anchorage. Confirming voice sprint ID, Blackbird. All intercept units hold position. Repeat, stand down. Stand down. 2 words, and just like that, the airspace changed. I wasn't an intruder anymore. I was expected. The Raptors stayed flanked beside me, their engines whispering restraint. A third voice, more hesitant, probably CIC level, broke the quiet. Blackbird, this is Control. Requesting status, intent, and welcome aboard? I smiled. Couldn't help it. Conducting perimeter integrity sweep. You've got holes, Control. I flew through one. There was a pause, a long breath of static. Understood. Anchorage is ready to receive. You're cleared for approach. Raptors will escort. Copy, I replied. Forming up. As we banked toward the carrier, I felt the familiar pressure settle in my chest. Not fear. Not nerves. Something else. Memory. That deck wasn't just steel and wires to me. It was the last place I saw Eli. My co-pilot. My best friend. The man who'd smiled at me from the canopy just before he was shot down on a classified mission in the Aleutian Range. They never recovered his wreckage. Never admitted he was flying that day. And the moment I asked too many questions, they grounded me. That's when I walked. But now I was back. And something told me they didn't call me in just to admire my aileron work. Below us, the massive deck of the Anchorage stretched out like a welcome mat. I could already see crew gathering along the rails, pointing skyward. Some had binoculars. Some just stood, arms crossed, trying to understand what they were seeing. A forgotten aircraft flanked by cutting-edge fighters. A name they hadn't heard in years. A woman who was never supposed to come back. As we touched into the landing pattern, I could feel it building. Buzz through the decks, rumors sprinting faster than sound. Officers demanding files they didn't have clearance to read. And me? I just locked in the gear, flipped on the approach lights, and brought my Tiger II in low, steady. Coming home doesn't always mean returning to where you started. Sometimes it means arriving as the version of yourself they never saw coming. My tires hit the deck with a jolt that rattled straight through the airframe, arresting cable catching like a lasso on a wild horse. The old girl held steady, wheels screaming, metal howling, and then just silence. I sat there for a moment, engine cooling, hands on the stick, looking out through the canopy at a dozen faces staring back. Not a single salute. Not yet. They didn't know if they were supposed to. I popped the canopy and climbed out slowly. My boots hit the steel, and for a second, I was 25 again, fresh out of Top Gun, walking across the deck with the weight of a classified future on my shoulders. Now I was 42. Scarred. Grounded once. Written off twice. But standing here anyway. A junior officer jogged up, looking like he wasn't sure whether to escort me or apologize. His name tag read, Lieutenant R. McCrae. Baby-faced, maybe 30, and clearly sweating more than he should have been. Commander Callahan? He asked, voice catching. That's the one, I replied. Though it's just Avery these days. He blinked. Admiral Conrad is waiting on the flight bridge. He said to bring you up the moment you landed. Everyone's expecting you. Yeah, I said, glancing at the growing crowd on the deck. I figured. What he didn't say was written all over his face. We thought you were a ghost. We thought you were myth. But myth doesn't taxi itself to the center of the carrier deck and step down like it's a Sunday morning. I followed him through the tower stairwell, every turn of the ship triggering old reflexes. Hallways I hadn't walked in 5 years still felt like home. Crew members whispered as I passed, some with awe, others with confusion. Then I stepped into the operations level of the bridge and came face to face with Admiral Conrad. He hadn't aged a day. Tall, silver hair, a jaw like a warship, and eyes that had seen every bad decision anyone ever tried to hide. He looked at me like I'd been carved from smoke and old memory. "Blackbird," he said simply. "Admiral, you never could enter a room quietly." "I didn't come here to be quiet." He stared at me for a long moment. Then finally, he extended his hand. "Welcome home." I shook it. And just like that, the past and present collided. He gestured to the CIC display behind him. A screen filled with thermal maps, radar returns, and data overlays. All focused on the same thing, northern breach points. "You flew through a blind spot," he said. "We didn't even know we had one." "That's because you're looking for digital ghosts," I replied. "These are analog phantoms. Whoever's flying in and out of your zone, they're using Cold War tricks with modern silence." "You think it's rogue?" "No," I said. "I think it's practiced." That caught his attention. He stepped closer. "So why did they send you?" "Why now?" I shrugged. "Maybe someone remembered that old problems need old solutions." "Or maybe," he said, eyes narrowing, "they think we're already compromised." I didn't answer, because the look in his eyes said what we were both starting to believe. This wasn't a test. It was a warning, and I just walked straight into the middle of it. The thing about flying off the grid is that you stop believing in coincidence. Too many things happen quietly to ever trust they're accidental. I stood with Admiral Conrad in the Anchorage's Combat Information Center, staring at the breach data. Heat signatures where there shouldn't be any. Altitude gaps with no corresponding radar returns. Blips that flashed and vanished like ghosts through fog. "I ran some analysis before I got here," I said, tapping one of the maps. "Flight pattern here, just off the North Shelf, matches a drift corridor I used to fly during blackout recon in 17. He raised an eyebrow. "Those corridors are classified. So's half the sky. Didn't stop whoever this is from using them." We were looking at patterns that didn't make sense to modern radar. But to someone like me, someone who flew nap of the Earth and lived off needle and gut flying, it was as clear as a signature. They were using old phantom loops. Low-fly buzz routes from the Blackbird era. Routes I'd helped map and classified flight ops from Greenland to the Bering Strait. "You think this is one of ours?" he asked. "No," I said, voice tight. "I think it used to be." Conrad stepped back from the console and crossed his arms. "We've got F-35s with ISR suites flying daily recon over that airspace. None of them saw this. Because they're flying above it," I said. "These incursions are hugging terrain. Digital birds don't feel the wind. They feel the feed. You want to catch what's coming through there, you need someone who can smell a turn before it happens." Conrad gave me a long look. "That why they sent you?" I nodded. "I'm not here to be saluted. I'm here to be bait." He didn't argue. That night, I slept aboard the Anchorage, in an old officer's cabin that still smelled like hydraulic fluid and metal polish. My room had been stripped years ago, of course, but someone had left a fresh flight suit folded on the cot. My name patch was already stitched in place, Blackbird. Next morning, before first light, I was back in my Tiger II, engine whining in the cold air, the sky above the Arctic tinted orange. The mission was simple: fly the blind corridor again. Low and dirty. Pull whatever was waiting out into the open. I launched solo, without Raptor support this time, just my instincts and a frequency no one had used in half a decade. At 30 miles out, the first static hit my headset. It wasn't random. It was a signal. Someone out there was listening and broadcasting right back. Encrypted. Fragmented. But buried in the white noise, I heard it. A call sign. My old one. Blackbird. Then silence. My stomach turned cold. Because I knew that voice. And he was supposed to be dead. Blackbird. It wasn't possible. That voice, raspy, clipped, familiar in a way that hit me like a punch to the ribs, crackled through the static like it had never left. It sounded strained, distorted, like it was pushing through a storm of jamming frequencies. But there was no mistaking it. "Eli." Repeat transmission. I barked into the mic. "Identify yourself." "This is Blackbird." "Who's on this channel?" Silence. Then another whisper. "Vector 212. No altitude. Don't trust." The signal cut out. I stared straight ahead, fists tight on the stick. Every part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake. Some glitch in the radio. A hijacked signature. Something explainable. But instinct doesn't deal in rationality. It deals in truth. And my gut told me that was him. The man I lost in a flameout over the Aleutian Range. The mission no one talked about. The one I wasn't allowed to debrief. The wreck they never recovered. The black box they claimed never existed. They said he was gone. But that voice? That was Eli. I pushed the Tiger too lower, hugging terrain, letting the world shrink to canyons and cliffs and freezing blue water below. Every ripple in the static became a breadcrumb. Every flicker in the spectrum a direction. 20 minutes in, I saw it. A glint of metal. Low. Moving fast. But not fast enough. I rolled left, fell in behind it. A twin-engine stealth-configured drone, flying without transponder, masking heat like an old State Route 71 trick. Its tail was marked with nothing but a single painted number, 217. No country. No emblem. Just shadow. I keyed the mic to a private channel, one that hadn't been used since we ran blackout missions together. Blackbird to Wraith. Is that you? Nothing. The drone banked hard, like it heard me, then ducked into a ravine near Mount Pavlov. I followed. Below, snow-dusted ridgelines. My altimeter dropped under 1,000 feet. Wind howled through the cockpit like a warning. Another blip on my scope. Second drone. Bigger. This one armed. They were escorting the first one now, trying to shield it, run interference. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a rogue flight. It was a retrieval op. They were protecting something or someone. I didn't have long. ECM started hammering my systems, old Cold War frequencies mixed with modern encryption. I lost radar. HUD flickered. But my compass stayed true. Analog doesn't blink. I pushed through the canyon, closing fast, just as the original drone leveled out and began transmitting again. Just one line. If you found this signal, it means they didn't finish the job. The message repeated once, then stopped. That was no drone protocol. That was a message from a human source. And if Eli was behind it, that meant one thing. He was alive. Somewhere in that corridor, my wingman had survived a mission they'd buried. And whatever he'd uncovered was worth killing over. Or silencing forever. I returned to the anchorage an hour later, cockpit shaking from turbulence, radio crackling with residual jamming, and my head full of a voice I wasn't supposed to hear again. They were waiting on deck before my wheels even kissed steel, Admiral Conrad, 2 intelligence officers in dark jackets, and a tech specialist from Joint Recon. No one said anything as I powered down. Just tight stares and folded arms. I climbed down, helmet under one arm, and walked straight up to Conrad. I heard his voice, I said. Eli's. He's alive. The Admiral didn't flinch. Didn't blink. But his silence spoke volumes. You knew, I said. He nodded. We suspected. That hit harder than I expected. I took a step back. You told me he was gone. That the crash site was unrecoverable. It was, said one of the intel men. But not because we couldn't find it. Because we weren't supposed to. He pulled a tablet from his bag and handed it to me. The screen displayed a heat map overlay, thermal imaging from 5 years ago, stitched together in jagged, grainy frames. At the center was a burning aircraft carcass. And next to it, a faint human signature. Crawling away. You had this the whole time? No, Conrad said. It was classified under a different command structure. Only surfaced last month during a file audit. What structure? I asked. The intel guy hesitated. Then said, Black Echo. I nearly dropped the tablet. Black Echo wasn't a command. It was a program. An experimental off-book division authorized for deep shadow drone development, ghost team recovery, and advanced autonomous piloting research. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it was the boogeyman behind every black site in the Arctic Circle. You're telling me Eli didn't die? He got scooped up by the same program that buried him? Conrad's jaw tightened. We think he tried to defect from it. That he went rogue inside his own operation. And now he's trying to expose it. What does that make me? I asked. The errand girl to bring him home? No, Conrad said, stepping closer. You're the only one who'll get close enough without them shooting you down. I looked down at the thermal image again. The timestamp in the corner was from the day after the crash. Eli had survived, at least long enough to be found. And now he was using my call sign, our call sign, to signal from behind enemy lines. Only this time, the enemy wasn't foreign. It was ours. We've tracked the origin point of the drone transmission, the text said. Remote facility. Old NORAD relay station on Kodiak Island. Been dark since '95, but something's been powering it up intermittently, low wattage bursts. Enough to suggest shortwave communications, possibly human interface. What's there now? I asked. Satellite doesn't know, but you can find out. Conrad handed me a new dossier, sealed in a red folder. Inside, mission orders stamped ultra black. Only 3 words under mission type: retrieve or terminate. I closed the folder. No, I said. The room fell silent. I'm not terminating anything. I'm bringing him back. The Admiral didn't argue. He just nodded once, sharp and final. Then suit up. Kodiak's waiting. 3 hours later, I was flying low over the frigid waters of the Gulf of Alaska, pushing my Tiger II through sleet and static, the sun a dying smear behind gray clouds. The further I got from the fleet, the quieter the world became. No radar pings, no wingmen, no voices in my ear. Just wind, metal, and the dull thump of my own heartbeat. Kodiak Island appeared through the weather like a myth surfacing from fog. Dense pines, jagged rocks, and the rusted bones of old military infrastructure clinging to cliffs like barnacles. Once a missile monitoring site, long abandoned after the Cold War. Officially, unofficially, it had power, and something was breathing inside it. I touched down on a makeshift gravel strip hidden beneath a ridgeline, engines cutting out with a reluctant sigh. No welcome party, no drones on approach, but the hairs on the back of my neck rose like radar dishes. I wasn't alone. I grabbed my sidearm and stepped into the cold. The air smelled of pine sap, salt, and old diesel, burnt residue from backup generators. I followed the slope up toward the decommissioned relay station, a squat concrete building buried halfway into the hillside. The door was rusted, but open. I stepped inside. The hum of an active server greeted me. Faint, barely there. I moved room to room, weapon drawn, until I reached the operations center. And there he was, back to me, standing over a cracked console lit with blue-green code scrolling across an ancient terminal. His shoulders were broader than I remembered, hair longer, grayer, but there was no mistaking the posture. The way he stood like the walls might explode any second, and he'd still be calm. Eli, I said, voice catching. He turned slowly. His face was leaner, tired, eyes sharper than I remembered, like he hadn't just survived, but seen something the rest of us weren't meant to. Avery, he said. Then he smiled, and for a second, everything rewound. To the flight deck. The stupid inside jokes. That last coffee before the mission, they never let us debrief. I thought you were dead, I said. I was, he replied. But they kept the body. I blinked. What? He gestured to the terminal. They didn't pull me out of the crash to save me. They pulled me to study me. Black Echo wanted to make pilots obsolete. Real-time decision systems. Human instincts hard-coded into AI. They didn't need my mind. Just the way it worked. I took a step closer. They ghosted you. He nodded. Used my voice. My call sign. Taught machines to think like me, and then sent those machines into sovereign airspace to test boundaries. My blood ran cold. The incursions. Worse than that, he said. They're not just probing defense corridors. They're simulating first strike tactics. Practicing. For who? Eli's jaw tensed. Anyone who bids high enough. He turned the screen to me. Strings of flight paths, algorithmic trees branching from old recon patterns. My old patterns. His. Our entire careers, weaponized. They're erasing us, Avery, he said. Digitizing us into extinction. And if we don't stop it, there won't be a cockpit left in 10 years that remembers how to fly by feel. I stared at the code. The patterns. The truth. Why call me? I asked. Because they trust you enough to kill me if I ran. I looked at him and realized he was right. I stood in that decaying bunker, surrounded by humming servers, decades-old wiring, and a man who shouldn't be alive. Eli, call sign Rafe, leaned against the console, breathing shallow, fingers twitching from what looked like years of stress, malnutrition, and worse. And I finally saw what the years had done. Not just to him. To both of us. Tell me you have a plan, I said. He nodded toward the far wall, where a hardwired uplink blinked steadily. That transmitter beams every 3 hours to a satellite that doesn't officially exist. Next pulse goes out in 20 minutes. What's in the next pulse? He gave me a look. Everything. Flight data. Behavior logs. Voice emulation packets. Our signatures, Avery. The last of them. My stomach dropped. They're closing the project. He nodded. erasing the source material once the ghost can fly without it. Which means once they transmit, they don't need me anymore. I looked at the gear he'd cobbled together, ancient terminals patched with modern components, burst filters jerry-rigged with duct tape and solder. It was genius. And desperate. So we cut the uplink. He shook his head. It's hardwired to an auto failover. We kill the signal too early, it triggers a backup transmission from another node. Only way to stop it is to take out the primary and trigger the deletion routine from inside. I knew that tone. That careful, calculated finality. You're not coming back from this, I said. No, he said softly. But you are. I stepped closer, heart pounding. You dragged yourself out of a crash. Survived in the wind. Hid from an entire Black Ops division. And now you're just going to hand it all off to me. He smiled. I'm not handing it off. I'm launching it. He handed me a drive. Rough. Cold. But alive. This has everything. Flight patterns, voice prints, system architecture. You get this back to Anchorage. You let them see what they built. You make them feel it. Eli. I know. He moved toward the panel. You've always flown the second pass. The one that makes it home. I hesitated, heartbreaking, soul torn in two. Then let me fly you home too. But he was already typing. Fast. Precise. The walls started blinking red. Internal failsafes tripping. Go, Avery, he said, not looking back. They can't hit what they can't follow. And you. He finally looked at me. Are the last pilot left who remembers how to disappear? I ran. Out the bunker, down the slope, into the cold gray dawn. The Tiger II waited, engine primed, breath steaming from its fuselage like a warhorse eager for a final charge. I climbed in, sealed the cockpit, and launched into the sky just as the first explosion rocked the hillside behind me. The signal uplink vanished in a flash of flame and shattered static. Eli was gone. But his voice, his ghost, was still with me. And in my hand was the proof they'd tried to bury. The flight back to the Anchorage was a blur of cloud and silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that buzzes with everything unsaid. Every vibration in the stick carried Eli's voice. Every turbulence bump, a memory. Every mile across open water, a weight pressing down on the cockpit like gravity had grown personal. By the time I crossed the outer fleet perimeter, I was already broadcasting my approach on the same old channel. My voice was calm, steady. Arctic Watch, this is Blackbird. Package in hand. One soul returning. No challenge. No intercept. They knew. The flight deck was already clear, the cables rigged, deck crew standing motionless along the rails like sentinels. Admiral Conrad was waiting when I climbed out, still as stone, as never leaving the drive in my hand. I didn't salute. I just held it out. This is the truth, I said. He took it without a word, tucked it into a hardened pouch, and signaled the comms officer behind him. Get this to intelligence, priority 1. No copies. No detours. He looked back at me. Rafe. I shook my head. He nodded. Just once. Nothing else needed to be said. Hours later, in a secure briefing room beneath the carrier's deck, I watched Admiral Conrad, Captain Yates from Naval Recon, and 2 Pentagon observers scroll through the contents of Eli's drive. Voice maps. Drone intercept videos. AI behavioral loops based on our flight patterns. And a partial access log that listed dates of testing missions, most of them within miles of contested borders, all without oversight. And then they reached the final file. One line of code with a timestamp and label. Last pilot exited. The room went quiet. Captain Yates looked over at me. This changes everything. No, I said. It reminds us. Of what? I stood, pulled the old patch from my flight suit, and set it on the table. That pilots aren't replaceable. That instinct doesn't get uploaded. That not everything that flies needs permission to matter. They didn't argue. The days that followed were full of reports, files reclassified, investigations launched. Black Echo was scrubbed from active databases, but not before the right people saw the damage. And the warning. But something else happened too. Something I didn't expect. They asked me to stay. Not to fly. Not like before. But to teach. Not doctrine. Not tactics. But the one thing the ghosts couldn't replicate. Feel. So I stayed aboard the Anchorage. Trained the next wave of pilots how to fly in silence. How to listen for meaning in static. How to know the difference between a blip on a scope and a presence in the sky. Lieutenant McCrae, babyface from the deck that first day, ended up being one of my best. One afternoon, after a brutal intercept sim, he looked at me and asked, "Ma'am, how do you know when it's really you up there?" and not just some programmed flight path. I smiled. You'll know, I said, when the sky listens back. 6 months later, the Navy established an annual recognition event, Echo Flight Day, to honor those whose service never made it into official records. Pilots who flew the impossible, disappeared without ceremony, or gave everything to missions no one would ever read about. They asked me to speak at the first one. I stood in front of 200 young aviators, rows of crisp flight suits, fresh faces, eager eyes. And I told them the truth. You may never get medals for what you do. You may fly missions that vanish in redacted ink. But when the time comes, when everything goes silent and you're alone in that cockpit, the sky will remember you. The frequency never forgets its own. That night, I returned to the deck, stood at the edge with the sea curling black below, wind humming past like a whisper. And I heard him, just faintly. Good work, Blackbird. And I smiled. Because some call signs don't die. They just fade into the air, waiting for the next one who can hear them.